Gudi is the Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction in the United Nations Environment Programme. An internationally renowned expert in disaster response, Dr. Murali has been involved in post-disaster response and follow-up of almost all major disasters of the 21st century, including the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami, Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar 2008, the Sichuan earthquake in China 2008, the Haiti earthquake in 2010, the Tohoku tsunami in 2011, and the floods which took place in Thailand in 2011. Dr. Murali obtained his MTech degree from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur in 1988. He received his PhD in engineering from the same institute in 1993. He has published several books and writes articles in leading Malayalam dailies occasionally. Dr. Murali is also a winner of the Kerala Sahitya Academy Awards 2018 for humorous literature. We will now commence this auspicious event with the powerful flag presentation.
There comes a time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. Oh, when it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all. We can't go on pretending day by day that someone somewhere will soon make a change. We all a part of God's great big family. And the truth, you know, love is all we need. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's true, we make a better day. Just you and me. Well, send them your heart
NinjaPhoenix.com.
so they know that someone cares, and their lives will be stronger and free, as God has shown us by turning stone to bread. And so we all must lend a helping hand. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones to make a brighter day. So let's start giving. Oh, there's a choice we're making. We're saving our lives. It's true, we make a better day.
Wow, that was truly the perfect depiction of the power of unity. We now have an address by Ms. Mangalam Karupia, the Deputy Secretary General of the Good Shepherd Model United Nations 2020.
Over 1.03 million and counting COVID-19 deaths worldwide. Race riots escalating in America. 80% of Indian online users have claimed to have experienced cybercrime. The number of people below the poverty line in 2019 was 33.98 million. Good morning to all present here. I know that wasn't a pleasant way to begin a speech, but this is our world, and there's no point in sugarcoating it, as this is where we live. In a world full of turmoil, tragedy, problems, violence, injustice, hunger, poverty, child labor, global warming, and so much more. But we can do something about it. The issues we face are way bigger than just one region or one country. But this is the time where we can put our differences aside and come together to make the world a better place. Creating and maintaining peace is a long and exhausting process, but worth the trouble. As Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, the first female president of the United Nations General Assembly, once said, "The more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war." This year's Good Shepherd Model United Nations is an online forum having 7 committees which are addressing issues such as eradicating xenophobia and racism, preventing a cyber war, handling the global financial crisis, preventing youth from being indoctrined into terrorist activities, preventing an increase in trafficking of falsified medical products in rural and urban areas, and many more pressing issues. Over the past few GSMUN conferences, I have learned a lot, and some being that every resolution will not pass, not every point will sway a committee, but what matters is the effort and hard work you put into it, as well as the ideas and lessons you take from it. These 2 days are going to be about researching, debating, compromise, and diplomacy. This is your chance to speak up for those who cannot, hear the unheard, help the helpless, make the unnoticed seen, think the unthinkable, learn the unknown, make the impossible possible. The world may not know what we discussed here today or tomorrow. It doesn't mean you didn't have an impact on it, because someday when each of you go out into the world to contribute your part, your ideas learned to creating peace will definitely spread with it, and slowly and together we can make the world a better place. And to quote Dag Hammarskjöld, the second Secretary General of the United Nations, the UN wasn't created to take mankind into paradise, but rather to save humanity from hell. Delegates, all the best for the sessions ahead, because this is the motion to commence debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mangala. I would now like to call upon the Secretary General, Master Devik Satisha, to declare the Good Shepherd Model United Nations 2020 open.
I now declare the Good Shepherd Model United Nations 2020 open.
I wish you and your team all the best, Devik. I now request Master Arman Jain to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning, respected Chief Guest, Dr. Murli Markodi, Senior Vice President, Mrs. Elzama Thomas, President, Mr. Jacob Thomas, Principal, Mr. Sheila Alexander, Academic Council members, parents, staff, and students. I welcome you all to the opening ceremony of Good Shepherd Model United Nations 2020. Every year, GSMUN challenges delegates to collaboratively propose solutions to some of the most pressing issues which our world faces. Be it the conflict in the Middle East, territorial disputes, or exploitation of resources, we've always sought to find solutions in the direst circumstances around the planet. Today, we are privileged to be in the presence of a luminary who has invaluable expertise in solving problems in the face of global crisis. Dr. Murli Markodi is the Operations Manager at the Crisis Management Branch of the United Nations Environmental Programme. He holds a PhD in Environmental Engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology at Kanpur, after which he attended the International Leadership Academy at the United Nations University and completed the Bayer's Environmental Leadership Program at the University of California, Berkeley. Between 1995 and 2003, Dr. Tamarkodi worked as a corporate advisor to Shell-operated oil companies in Brunei and Oman. After joining the UN in 2003, he's dealt with crisis response in all major disasters and conflicts in the century, including environmental issues associated with conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Liberia, Sudan, and occupied Palestinian territories. He has also been at the forefront of response to environmental issues caused by tsunamis, floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, oil spills, and explosions of ammunition dumps around the world. With more than 25 years of international experience in this field of environmental management and crisis situation, Dr. Tamarkodi is truly one of the world's leading authorities on this topic and frequently lectures in universities around the world on the same. He is also a writer of several books in Malayalam and occasionally writes articles in the leading Malayalam dailies. For this, he even received the Kerala Sahitya Academy Award for Humorous Literature in 2018. Sir's words of wisdom on remote learning have also been viewed by educators on YouTube and have gained large popularity over the months. It is truly an honor to have amongst us an individual who uses both his knowledge and experience to have a positive impact on our planet. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Tamarkodi to address the gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Arman. And now, for the most awaited moment of today, I would now like to call upon our chief guest, Dr. Murali Thumarukudi, the Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction in the United Nations Environment Programme, to address us all.
Dear young friends at the Good Shepherd School, Ooty, I am extremely delighted, privileged, and feel honored to have been invited to give a lecture at the opening of the Model United Nations, which is being held at your institution. I want to thank the principal and the organizers for inviting me to this event. I'm always inspired when I see young people passionate about the United Nations. I am equally delighted when I see young students interested in topics beyond what they study in their school books. These days, far too much time or far too many children are spent on learning and relearning what is there in the textbook. And they spend very little time on what is outside their classroom and in the wider world. It is only when we have our new generation interested in factors beyond their classroom, our generation can feel happy that we are handing over our future to safe hands. So to that degree, I am doubly delighted that you are talking about topics outside your classroom, you are thinking about United Nations. It is 75 years since the United Nations was established. After the extremely tragic events of the Second World War, the United Nations, of course, followed the League of Nations, which was established after the First World War. But even though it did many good things, it could not prevent the Second World War from happening, and that's how it collapsed. So if you ask, what is the one thing which the United Nations have managed to do in the last 75 years? Clearly, it is that there was no Third World War. So the reason why United Nations came into existence remains valid, and it has served a purpose. Even if it has not done anything else, it has prevented a Third World War. It was avoided all the miseries which could have happened during that time. Many people assume that the world is a more turbulent place now. There are more disasters, more conflicts, more crime, more poverty, and so on. This is primarily because we hear more about these issues. It is on your face. 100 years back, a small disaster which happened in a remote island in the Pacific would never make into our local newspaper. It traveled very slow as well. So, surely there are conflicts happening around the world. Surely there are disasters happening. Surely there is poverty still around us, amongst us. But if you look at the global trajectory as to what has happened in the last 100 years, clearly we are living at a time of unprecedented peace, certainly a lot of prosperity, and certainly a lot more children now have access to schools, a lot more people have access to education, and so on. And all this was possible primarily because we did not have nations fighting with one another the way they used to. And therefore, the resources are being directed towards the right thing. towards education, towards employment, towards food production, and so on. The world is right now going through an unprecedented crisis, a crisis like the one which our generation have never seen. But not only our generation, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, they have not seen a crisis like this. Clearly, there was a Second World War in the last century. Of course, it killed millions of people. But if you look at the speed with which Corona or COVID-19 has impacted the world, it is truly unprecedented. From December 2019, when it started in China, to April 2020, when all the 193 member states of the United Nations were impacted, and some. If you look at the scale of the impact, UNESCO estimated that the education of 1.5 billion people, students, were interrupted by COVID. It has never happened before. International Labour Organization estimated that employment of 1.7 billion people were affected, interrupted, some even destroyed by this crisis. It has never happened before. Some sectors completely destroyed, such as tourism, hospitality, airline. So in this unprecedented crisis, what is the world doing and what is the United Nations doing? As you know, clearly, COVID is primarily a health crisis, and the World Health Organization is leading the fight against that crisis. It is giving guidance every day for the last 6 months to the world community on how things could be handled and should be handled. Of course, a lot more need to be done in terms of coordinating between countries. Of course, the response to the economic crisis has to be a lot more coordinated between countries, how stimulus is provided, how aid is provided in developing countries, and so on and so forth. But at least as of now, there are clear guidance on what need to be done on health that is being followed, that's being looked up to, and that's clearly saving lots of lives around the world. We should not forget that while COVID is really around us, we were in the midst of even a bigger crisis which has been enveloping us for the last 30 years. I'm talking about climate change. At least we know the climate is changing. IPCC reports, second report onwards, has been telling there's a discernible human footprint in it, that humans can do something about it. Yet, we really have not done enough. We have not done enough as much as the scientists have asked us to do. You know about Greta Thunberg. She has been saying very strongly that the current generation has failed in that matter, and the new generation has to take over. And I am very delighted that in the modern United Nations, you would be looking at these things, which matters to the entire humanity. Issues of climate change, issues of human rights, issues of environment. And when young people start to think of these things, start to be sensitive to issues outside their classrooms, start to internalize the global dynamics as to how nations react and collaborate and compete, that's when things start to change. I have seen many model United Nations. Model United Nations where people from different countries come and they take up the roles. And of course, they play their roles very well. But I have also seen model United Nations held in India as well as in other countries, where people from only one country come, but they assume the role of other nations. And within half an hour, they completely internalize those roles and those prejudices and their preferences. You will see this shortly when your game start in a way. I encourage you to enjoy the session. I encourage you to think deeply about the issues. I encourage you to carry this beyond the classroom. I encourage you to inherit this world and make a better place. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind and inspiring words, sir. We now have the co-heads of the various committees in the GSMUN 2020 informing us about the roles of the respective committee, members, and the agenda they have fixed for this MUN. Firstly, I would like to call upon Meet Dobaria, the co-head of the Economic and Financial Council.
Good morning, esteemed Chief Guest Mr. Murali Thumarakudi, teachers and distinguished delegates present. Welcome to the Economic and Financial Affairs Committee, ECOFIN, of Good Shepherd International's School, Model United Nations 2020. On the international level, the head of ECOFIN is Sheikh Niang, and one of the main agendas discussed is measures to address the economic crisis in the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela. The nation of Venezuela remains today in the midst of a decade-long economic crisis, due to which the public and government have suffered a lot in terms of financial management and to grow the struggling economy. This year, I am going to co-chair ECOFIN, and I look forward to working with all of you over the next 2 days and to make this MUN an enjoyable and intellectually stimulating event. I have the privilege of serving as your co-chair and of this conference along with my friend and colleague Harshul Amin. This year, our committee has 22 delegates who have different countries allotted to them. As my first chairing experience, I look forward to debating and deliberating on several key proposals for resolutions. Our committee is going to discuss 2 key issues. The first topic on our agenda will be measures to be adopted by the global community to avoid a global financial crisis. Even as I speak, we are facing an unprecedented economic and health crisis with a global pandemic crippling the world's economy and fears of recession looming large on the horizon. Further, the spread of COVID-19 may require the imposition of stringent containment measures, actions that may lead to a further strain on the fragile global economy. Therefore, any discussion on the measures to be adopted to avoid a global financial crisis at this juncture is very crucial as the global community seeks to avoid the Great Depression of 1932 or the international debt crisis. Needless to say, ECOFIN has had and will continue to play a huge role in improving the economic well-being of every member state as well as the world as a whole. ECOFIN has helped many developing countries with financial assistance through tough times of crisis and development in order to spur growth and prosperity. The second topic for discussion pertains to reducing unemployment due to territorial disputes between Israel and Palestine. This topic ties well with the first. The impact of coronavirus COVID-19 continues to hit the Palestinian economy hard. The first quarter of 2020 saw another rise in Gaza's unemployment rate, which reached 45.5% compared to 42.7% in the last quarter of 2019 and 45.1% in 2019 overall. The unemployment rate in West Bank rose as well. The occupation of Palestinian economy in a Palestinian territory by Israel continues to deepen the economic and social hardship for Palestinians, and unless urgent measures are taken to resolve the dispute, the economic hardships faced by the Palestinians are likely to increase. Finally, may I congratulate you for your acceptance into the conference and indeed our committee. And may I further promise to do my very best from my part to make it your most constructive and joyful MUN experience. Harshul and I will look forward to sharing this experience with you as chair of the ECOFIN committee as we deliberate on the above mentioned issues. We hope you will enjoy our sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Meet. Next, we have Kashika Sunil Gulabani, the co-head of the Special Political and Decolonization Committee.
Good morning to one and all. The Special Political and Decolonization Committee, SPECPOL, is the fourth committee of the United Nations General Assembly. It deals with problems of decolonization of countries that have been ruled by foreign powers, the effects of atomic radiation, UN peacekeeping, and special political missions. It also covers the problems of UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which focuses on Palestinian refugees in the Near East. SPECPOL also has to have knowledge about Israeli practices and the uses of outer space for peaceful purposes. This committee has its headquarters in New York, United States, and is headed by Mr. Mohammad Hussein. The member countries under the chairperson are 15, including the 5 veto powers. Our committee this year has been set to explore the following topics: the territorial disputes between India and China at Ladakh, and the government's monitoring of private companies in space. Both these topics are of great significance and are turning out to be issues that the world is facing recently because of the increasing number of wars and breakdown of diplomacy between countries. The Sino-Indian dispute over Ladakh territory has been worsening with time. The two countries are competing to build infrastructure over a large piece of land in the middle, which is called the line of actual control. There's been much violence and there's no abatement seen in the near future. Moving on to the second topic, NASA opened the space sector for private companies halfway through 2019, whereas ISRO did that in the June of 2020. These companies work on space projects such as building of satellites, but are owned by individuals or non-government organizations. The governments of these countries are opening up the sector with the goal of pushing the frontiers of science. This year, SPECPOL is headed by Haryant Nagesh of IB1D and will be co-headed by me, Kashika Gulabani of IB1A. We also have a total of 20 delegates. The chair, teachers, and the delegates of SPECPOL are determined to work together and come up with legitimate solutions which will benefit both the representatives' own country and the rest of the world in this year's GSMUN. I have seen that the delegates in my committee have fine-tuned their debating and research skills, and one can only go forward from this junction. We have huge expectations and hope for the best for the committee. I would lastly like to wish all the delegates luck on behalf of the chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Kashika. Now we have the co-head of the Youth Assembly, Krish Rajkumar Jain.
I'm privileged to stand in front of you as the chairperson of the Youth Assembly to voice out openly the two of the pressing needs of the community, drawing the strength from the UN Youth Assembly of 24th August 1949. Our discussions revolve around mainly two themes: the measures to reduce indoctrination of youth into terrorist activities and dealing with misinformation and its impact on society. The young and energetic delegates representing many countries formulated this year's GSMUN. Irrespective of the doctrines that people follow, be it political, religious, geographical, many people either fall into for many reasons, ranging from belief systems, financial burden to indoctrination. For whatever reason, maybe the youth's vital energy is being used, which could otherwise be used for nation building. Peacemaking process is channelized by hatred-induced actions, which was the initiating discussion. With the explosion of technology, when thoughts are immediately flashed in words, with a much greater population accessible to it, the importance of social media cannot be ignored. With the current pandemic of COVID-19 has opened another venue of misinformation, from vaccine production to the medicines that cure COVID-19, another feather added to the existing arenas of medical prognosis. With all the media peripheral, are we getting the right information is one of the key queries raised and the discussion of its consequences. The media info stemmed from being the spokesperson of one organization or propaganda can influence many. The committee would seek to see the cause and effect with which these problems can be dealt. There is no better place to find the answers than our own very mind. We, the youth, with our fresh minds, ready for innovation, are capable of dealing with any crisis that crosses our path. So here I am, excited to witness the heated discussions and the debates produced from the brains of our very young delegates. Wishing everyone a lively GSMUN 2020. Thank you.
Very well spoken, Krish. I would now like to call upon Rishika Himanshu Supariwala, the co-head of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime.
There are children all around the world waking up every morning to see what a drug fiend his or her parents have become. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime the committee acting as an apex body to tackle issues related to drugs and crime all around the world. It is the fundamental pillar of a comprehensive drug control strategy and is regarded to be the principal method utilized by member states and UNODC to address illicit drug crop cultivation. The two topics held up for effective discussions during the course of GSMUN 2020 include the threat of organized crime and piracy near Latin American countries, preventing an increase in trafficking of unauthorized medical products in rural and urban settings. Drugs, arms, human trafficking make organized crime among the most powerful, wealthiest, and deadliest non-state problems in the world, especially in Latin America. Organized crime uses corruption, intimidation, and political influences. Piracy is an illegal activity that usually results from economic and governmental problems. Substandard and falsified medical products may cause harm to patients. These lead to loss of confidence in medicines, healthcare providers, and health systems. An estimated 1 in 10 medical products in low and middle income countries is substandard or falsified. 2 lakh people die worldwide due to ingesting drugs. Fewer than 1 in 5 who need treatment actually receive it. The UNODC is dedicated to turning these statistics around. Chaired by the head Denise D'Souza, with 20 delegates representing 18 countries and 1 organization of the United Nations. UNODC is primed and primed to deliver worthwhile resolutions in promoting the theme Responsible Vision, Action and Governance for Peace and Planet. Thank you, and let's play a part in retrieving the world from the crimes it has fallen into.
Thank you, Rishika. We now have the co-head of the Disarmament and International Security Council, Adesh Kheria.
Good morning, esteemed Chief Guest, Mr. Murli Thumarakodi, respected teachers and dear delegates. It's a great honor to be co-chairing the first committee of the United Nations, the Disarmament and International Security Committee. Currently being headed by Mr. Agustin Santos, DISEC is the committee that is always ready to combat the rapidly proliferating global issues that relate to disarmament and puts the hard-achieved peace in peril. We strive to find the solutions to the problems faced by the international security regimes, be it national or private. Our much evaluated opinion is always offered. Making the world a better place to live in is all that matters. Our committee, situated in New York, United States of America, deals with any challenge, any problem that deals with disarmament, global challenges, and threats to peace that affect the international community. Backed by 195 countries, DISEC is one of the biggest committees in the United Nations. Indeed, this opportunity to co-chair DISEC along with my friend and chair, Diansha Magish, has been a prestigious one. This year, present in the committee are 20 delegates representing 20 countries in total. This GSMUN, after hours of exhausting research and discussion in regard with GSMUN's theme, the topics that have been selected are government's accountability of and responsibility with confiscated goods and foreign intervention in matters of international security. In this modern era, the law is of utmost significance. The law is what keeps the society up and running. The law maintains peace and avoids conflicts. However, people break the law for their own reasons and often bring contraband goods to the country, which is often banned by the government. Therefore, the government takes these goods away. Now the question arises, what does the government do with these goods? Does the government destroy them, or does it use them for its own benefit? Foreign intervention in 195 countries make this world. All countries are dependent on each other in some way or the other. Unfortunately, not all countries are at peace. There are prevailing conflicts among some countries, and all countries are affected due to these countries. Do all countries need to engage in the conflict of a few countries? Probably not. This is exactly what we are going to be discussing. In matters of international security, should there be foreign intervention? In conclusion, I would like to say that I am looking forward to begin the GSMUN and have heated yet formal and fruitful debate. I promise to do everything I can to make this GSMUN a memorable and a unique experience that will be remembered forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Adesh. We now have Nitya Nilesh Dhanani, the co-head of the United Nations Human Rights Council.
A very good morning to one and all present here.
Founded in 2006, the United Nations Human Rights Council is a body whose mission is to protect and promote human rights around the world. 47 members of the UNHRC strive to ensure that everyone can access the right to seek asylum and find safe refuge in another foreign area. It is not only responsible for strengthening the promotion and protection of thematic human rights throughout the globe, but also addresses the situations of human rights violations and makes recommendations on them. Today, 1 in every 50 human beings is either a migrant worker, a refugee, an asylum seeker, or an immigrant living in a foreign country. As the governments grapple with the new realities of their multi-ethnic communities, there has been a significant rise in discrimination and the violence directed against migrants, refugees, and other non-nationals. The main issues tackled during this year's GSMUN by our committee are eradicating systematic xenophobia and religious or ethnic discrimination on a global scale, and censorship and violation of the right to freedom of expression by the general population. In the recent past, these topics have forged their way up and are rampant. Every person not belonging to a certain place feels left out, and stereotypes of specific castes and cultures create immense disturbance to the victims of these xenophobic attacks. And with the rapid increase in the use of technology, especially during the pandemic, censorship and the right of expression through the media and other platforms have been suppressed. The denial for the right of speech, prejudice, and discrimination are extremely vulnerable subjects, therefore being precarious and sensitive affairs. With quite a few practice sessions and ample time to research, the delegates seem prepared on the topics, with the knowledge gained by them over the span of the past few days. The committee intends to carefully and strategically tackle the problems at hand, coming up with the best possible solutions benefiting the community as a whole. On behalf of the chair, I would like to wish the delegates all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitya. And finally, we have the co-head of the Security Council, Rashi Kedia.
I quote, "The world will not evolve past its current state of crisis by using the same thinking that created the situation." Albert Einstein. I unquote. A very good morning to the chief guest, invitees, dignitaries, academic council members, teachers, heads, co-heads, and delegates of all committees. Security Council has been one of the most important committees of the United Nations. The presidency of the Council is held by one country for 1 month each. Currently, the country holding presidency is the Russian Federation. Our committee, the United Nations Security Council, focuses on discussing issues such as piracy, terrorism, peace and security, protection of civilians, and many more. The Security Council consists of 15 members, out of which 5 are permanent members and 10 are non-permanent members. This year's GSMUN Security Council will be chaired by Rishabh Narayan Sultania of IB1D and co-chaired by me, Rashi Kedia of IB1B. This year, the Security Council will be discussing 2 major crises. The first one related to the peace and security of Central African region. This involves a group of militants trying to take over the government. This group of militants has also kidnapped and made a lot of damage to the region and the citizens. Since Africa is one of the least developed countries, it makes it even harder for it to get the situation into control. The second topic that will be discussed in the committee is the increase in cyber threat due to the increase in the online users during the pandemic. The pandemic has affected the whole world in one or the other way. Due to the pandemic, a large number of the world's population is dependent on the online sources, which increases the number of users. This causes an increase in cybercrime as well as cyber threat. We are looking forward for mind-blowing solutions from the delegates and active participation. We believe that all the delegates under us are capable of making all the debates heated and fruitful with the best insights. Wishing all the delegates the very best from all of us for the coming productive days. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashi. Before we conclude today's glorious event, we have the rhythmic percussion interlude. Didn't those varying beats melodically create a stir in our hearts? Finally, I call upon the school captain girls, Dhyani Kunt, to deliver the expression of gratitude.
Good morning, all. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable morning. Memorable, for we are in this virtual experience together in the face of such adversity. Let me first of all start by giving glory to the Almighty God for making today's occasion a successful one. First and foremost, on behalf of the entire school and student body, I would like to thank our gracious chief guest, Mr. Murali Thamakudi, the Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction in the UN Environment, who, despite his busy schedule, has found time to grace this occasion. Your speech was very insightful. Thank you, sir. I express my heartfelt thanks to the President, Mr. Jacob Thomas, Senior Vice President, Mrs. Ultima Thomas, the Principal, Mrs. Sheila Alexander, the Director of Activities, Mr. Dominic Schudhorst, and the ACM for the instant support for this year's virtual GSMUN. Furthermore, I thank all the heads and co-heads of various committees for their valuable contribution, guidance, and encouragement towards making the preparatory phase of GSMUN a successful one, and for being the great guides for all the delegates. A special thanks to the co-heads for sharing their words of encouragement in their speeches. Not to forget Master Arman Jain for extending a hearty welcome to everyone joining us. Heartfelt gratitude to the school's IT team for evincing interest in covering the event and making all the technical arrangement, and to all the teachers in charge who worked behind the scene. Lastly, I would like to thank MC of our event, Master Abhishek Krishnan, for facilitating the smooth running of the event. Last but not least, I thank you all for your cooperation and making this online event a successful one. Thank you all for your attention, and happy debating, delegates.
Thank you, Dhyani, and a very big thank you to everyone present here. I hope you all have a great day, and remember, together we can make a change.